Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Yablonski, and I'm a designer coming out of Detroit. And today we're going to be talking about humane design patterns. Now, I just want to preface with a few things. The slides will be available at the end, so don't worry about trying to capture notes really quickly. I'll have a bit.ly link at the end, and I'm going to hang out. If you want to talk about what I'm going to show you today, I'll be around. All right, so let's get started. Every once in a while in life, things happen. You see things that might change your trajectory a little bit, right? It might be a documentary, it might be a vacation, it might be someone you met, right? And something like this happened to me last year with this wonderful documentary on Netflix called Abstract. You guys might be familiar with it. And one of the episodes that really stood out to me and kind of captured me was one where they basically highlighted Ralph Gilles, who's the head of design at Fiat Chrysler Automobiles in Detroit. I found this one very, very captivating for a lot of reasons. The automotive space is changing in a lot of ways right now. Technology is completely transforming the way these vehicles are not only being created, but the technology that's going into them. Autonomous technology is absolutely going to change the way people experience mobility all across the world. And you have AI and machine learning and advanced radar technology that's really seeing a lot of challenges come to this space. In fact, it's been more change in the automotive industry than it's seen in probably its entire history. And as a designer, I found this really captivating. I love challenges, and I really wanted to be a part of this. And this was a kind of a switch for me because I had traditionally always been focused on creating websites, creating mobile applications. And so this thought of kind of working in this parallel space really appealed to me. So I made the leap, right? I jumped into this new industry at the tail end of last year, joined the team at General Motors, and have been fortunate enough to work on really cool technology like you see here, the autonomous features that's part of the Cadillac vehicles. And it's been really exciting, right? A lot of challenges, a lot of new learning opportunities, but kind of familiar to us in the tech space too, right? We have repeating kind of challenges we have to face, both organizationally and technologically. So it felt familiar, but it was different at the same time. One thing that was not the same was this concept of driver distraction. It's very unique to the automotive space where, you basically have to protect the driver from distractions, right? And for good reason. Distracted drivers sometimes die. And, as a design team that's designing in-vehicle digital experiences, we really have to consider the impact of these kind of things, right? We have to consider how the technology we're putting in the vehicle might distract the drivers. And really at the core of this is considering the well-being of that driver and those people, those passengers in that car. And it led me to this realization that we really just don't take tech distractions serious enough. In the web and app space, we really don't have this similar kind of concept for driver distraction. We don't have user distraction or how the technology that we're releasing out into the world is really affecting the people that are using it. In fact, we sort of do the opposite. We sort of, at least from a design standpoint, kind of congratulate. We celebrate these sticky applications, these habit-forming products, right? These services that keep people and platforms that keep people coming back over and over and over again. And we even kind of, subscribe to these formulas that really kind of keep people coming back in this engagement loop, right? This is Nir Eyal's hook model, which is basically in effect in every social media platform in existence, right? And it's really about an engagement loop that keeps you coming back through behavioral psychology and through investment and then repeated triggers keeps you coming back over and over. To exacerbate all these issues, we've moved fast and we've broken a lot of things. Technology has moved so fast in the last couple of years that I think really the impact that it's had on the people using these products and services that we're creating as an industry hasn't really been totally considered, right? The data, the jury's still out, but this research is starting to roll in where we're starting to realize that these things might have an impact on people that we don't necessarily want, right? These habit-forming products and these sticky experiences might actually be bad for the people that are using them. I think Mark Weiser, who the CTO of Xerox PARC, nailed it in 1996 when he said that the scarce resource of the 21st century will not be technology. It will actually be our attention. And this is kind of a little bit alarming because even back then he saw the writing on the wall. In a time when beepers were the hottest technology gadget, he saw that technology would basically not be the scarce resource. The most valuable commodity would actually be our actual human attention. And not only that, but really we're in a competition for this reoccurring natural cycle called sleep, right? Technology, I'm sure Netflix meant this as somewhat of a joke, but it's sort of a telling joke because they're saying that HBO's not their competitor, YouTube or cable TV's not their competitor. It's actually sleep that's their biggest competitor. It's sleep that's taking away from their profit margin, their bottom line. And I think it's time to really consider how tech has led to a lot of problems. You don't have to look very far to see all around you. We're suffering from shorter attention spans these days. There's an increase in anxiety and depression. The research is coming in all the time. Sleep deprivation, distracted driving, of course. Social shallowness. We start to kind of value and prioritize likes and comments over meaningful interaction with each other, right? We get on the elevators and look at our phones instead of talking to each other. Constipation, scratchy skin. I add those in there, but it really starts to read like an infomercial, side effects list. It gets kind of comical after a while. And the truth is, I don't think design teams really set out to do this, right? They don't set out to create addictive technology. It sort of happens over time. Teams, they start off trying to solve human problems, whatever that might be. And over time, growth and investment, maybe a board of directors, those priorities start to shift a little bit, right? We start to prioritize the business goals over human goals. And when we do this, bad things start to happen. And I think it's really time for us to really consider how we can align human goals with technology goals, right? How we can start to kind of prioritize human value created as opposed to time on site or daily active users, right? There's a few ways we can do this. The first, wipe the slate clean, right? Redefine what success looks like. Our success metrics, like time on site, they're counterproductive to human well-beings. And we can switch that up, right? We can measure success in different ways. The other way we can do this is regulation and certification. Now, these are not my two favorite words, right? But it's worked for a lot of industries. Regulation, you regulate the output and how it affects people, right? This is how every other industry known to man does these kind of things. And two, you certify the practitioners of that industry. Now, I don't like the idea of being a certified, practitioner of design and development, but that is definitely one way to approach the ethical implications of the work we're doing right now. And lastly is principle-guided design. Getting back to human-centered values in our practice, right? We make it a little bit more personal. This is actually the one I want to talk about today because I think it's the one that, as technologists, as people putting things out there in the world, it's the space that we can have the most impact, right? It's the space where we can actually affect change easier. And one way to do this is design principles. Because design principles They're awesome, right? They help kind of align an entire team around a shared set of values that creates more consistency in the design decisions being done in the team. And this extends to the engineers on the team too, right? We align on what the values of the products and services we put out into the world must align to. I looked really deep and hard at this for a while because it's been on my mind for quite a while, and so I did a lot of research and I created a website called Humane by Design, which really captures a set of principles that I started to see kind of pop up, right? There's companies out there that are doing a lot of great stuff. They're moving in the right direction, and I really wanted a place where I could start to identify those, categorize them, right, and start to kind of see patterns. And with Humane by Design, that's what I did. And on this website, you essentially outline 6 key principles, which I'll go through today. We're going to start with finite. Finite dictates that we can maximize overall quality of time spent by bounding the experience and prioritizing meaningful content. So what does this mean? What can we do? Well, there's a few tactics that we can take. The first is we can start by just letting people know when they're caught up, right? You've seen everything up to this point. There's no need to move on. Ironically enough, Instagram was the first to kind of feature this, or to debut this feature. And I find it actually really refreshing because now I don't have to scroll through and try to identify what I might have already seen when I'm scrolling through my Instagram feed. It's a helpful reminder, a bit of friction that we reintroduce to just visually indicate, to signify to people, you're caught up, you've seen everything up to this point. Another example that I think teams can leverage might feel like a little bit step back. It's a step back a few years, right? A time before infinite scrolling, where we introduce this load more button, right? Send off an AJAX request, get this content, load it up, instead of doing infinite scrolling. And I think, one service that uses this is Dribble. And I find this really refreshing because I don't have to kind of mindlessly zombie scroll through a Dribble feed and hope that I'm, and not really engage with the content or get anything meaningful out of it. I have this kind of roadblock, right? A bump in the road, a little bit of friction that forces me as a person to make a conscious choice. As a user, to make a conscious choice, do I want to continue consuming this content? And we've all seen this, the timer, the autoplay video. I've watched entire seasons of shows on Netflix because of this thing. And quite honestly, I'm just too lazy to get up and change it or whatever. But I think the reality is, humans often take the path of least resistance, and we're seldomly going to stop this. And once we're, binge watched an entire show, we look back and we really ask ourselves, why did I do that? What value did I get out of that? And yes, it might have been a decision you made as a person, but it starts to kind of form your opinion of the service too. And so I think if we skip autoplay and we just introduce a little bit more friction in these experiences by, maybe recommending video, recommending a post, recommending a product, but not basically playing that video, whatever it might be, it's a much better pattern. It's a more humane pattern. It's a finite pattern. And I think in the quest for these frictionless experiences that we've seemingly been obsessed with for years now, a little bit more friction might turn out to provide a little bit more value to the people on the other side of that product. All right. We're going to switch gears a little bit. The next principle I want to talk about is respectful. Respectful is all about ensuring notifications are respectful of people's time, attention, and overall digital well-being. We get inundated with distractions all day, notifications everywhere, right? This is a fact of life in modern times. But I think there's some things that design teams, that technologists can really start to introduce. First is just align the delivery with the urgency of what you're trying to communicate. If you need to notify your user of something that's happening in the app or service, consider the urgency of that information. Is it dire? Do they need to know right then? And most of the time, that's probably a big no, right? Most of the time, we can skip notifications altogether. We don't need push notifications. We can let them know when they're ready to engage with your service or app. The next thing we can do, I think, is really just allow for more personalization. And there's a lot of really great apps that do that. I think Slack does an excellent job where you can really kind of just modify how and when Slack will interrupt you. And I think this is a powerful feature that can really be introduced in all the tools that we're using, right? You're basically setting the stage for when and how you're going to be interrupted. And I think this level of control is exactly what provides a lot more value to the people on the other end. The last one I want to talk about is really adapting to user context. Now, a lot of times technology doesn't really respect the social norms that we adhere to, right? If I notice that you are concentrating on something, I'm way less likely to interrupt you because I respect you as a human being. And I think technology should actually do the same thing. It's great to see companies actually starting to roll these kind of things out too, with like Focus Assist and Microsoft's Windows, where really it starts to say, "Hey, I can configure when and how I'm going to be interrupted." And even nice convenience features like catch me up when I'm ready to engage again. Catch me up. What did I miss? Right? And it's the thoughtful kind of configuration like that that makes this tool very, very powerful, and it protects a very valuable resource for human beings, which is their focus. Okay, we're going to switch gears again and take a look at another principle, transparent. Transparent really says that we can be clear and honest about the data that's being collected from people and why it's being collected, how this data will be used, and we should avoid dark patterns that exploit human psychological vulnerabilities. All the time, I see apps like they want to access basically your entire life, and it's just like a simple like camera app or something. You know, it's kind of questionable a lot of times the amount of information that these apps are really looking for and asking for. I think, and you know, as it was pointed out by Karen on Wednesday in her keynote, Karen Sandberg, that really technology is kind of infiltrated all the aspects of our lives, right? It's basically become integrated in everything that we're doing. In fact, it's opened us up to a lot of vulnerabilities. And really kind of the convenience that it offers is kind of left us really kind of vulnerable in terms of data breaches and these kind of things. I want to kind of correct that. Her name's actually Karen Sandler. Excellent talk on Wednesday. The next thing we can do is really just kind of give people the right to know. Let them know before they even download your app or service, this is what you're in for. This is the data that's going to be collected, and this is how it's going to be collected, right? It's this level of transparency that I think means a lot. And additionally, once they've downloaded the app, how people kind of are communicated to in terms of what this app is now accessing. If it needs access to your camera, let them know that. Don't start to access other things, right? It's this level of transparency that I think people, it provides a layer of trust, right? You're establishing trust with people when you do things like this. And then once they've used your app, really let them know this is the data that we're accessing. This is what your data looks like. Give them full transparency around that. And it's kind of ironic that some of the worst offenders in the past are taking really great steps in the right direction when it comes to this. Facebook being one of them. I found my ad preferences page not too long ago and discovered all these kind of data vectors that Facebook's been collecting on me when it comes to serving up ads on their platform. I think this is interesting because it even allows you to kind of personalize these, delete them altogether if you want to, right? But it's this level of transparency that really wasn't there not too long ago. And for the largest social media platform in the world to kind of take this step, I think is significant. The other thing I encounter all the time is just finding a really hard time to how do you delete this thing, right? How do you delete your account? I think one thing we can do is just the right to be forgotten. Give people the ability to easily delete their account. Don't obscure that. Don't put that in some kind of deep, rooted menu, right? Put it right out there where they can access it. And establish that trust with people a little bit more, because the likelihood that they'll come back to your service or app in the future when they need it again is pretty high. We do that quite often, actually. So make deleting your account easily. And this is a big one. We need to avoid misdirection, right? Dark patterns are everywhere. And if you're not familiar, dark patterns are really tricks on apps and websites that really kind of force you to doing something that you wouldn't have otherwise wanted to do. And they're everywhere. In fact, Princeton University and the University of Chicago recently ran a study. They crawled 11,000 websites and found over 1,800 dark patterns. They're absolutely everywhere. In fact, I want to point out one that I think is the most diabolical dark pattern I've ever seen. It's a Snapchat ad with what appears to be a hair on the screen. And when you go to swipe it, you inadvertently click on the ad and find yourself on a shoe website. I know, right? All right. The fourth principle I want to talk about is thoughtful. Thoughtful indicates that we can embrace thoughtful friction to prevent harm and abuse, protect people's privacy and security, and steer them toward healthier digital habits. Now, one way we can do this is really to just slow people down a little bit. Do you really want to take this action you just indicated you want to take? And this has been around forever with confirmation modals, right? But I think just because it's a confirmation modal and it's been around forever doesn't mean you can't kind of ingest or inject a little bit of brand personality into it. And I think apps like MailChimp do an excellent job of that. We can also just kind of require confirmation, like confirmation modals. Really what we're trying to do is just slow people down, keep their best interests in mind, and say, is this an action you're positive you want to take? In today's world, I think that security is also a priority that we need to really take serious. And things like two-factor authentication are a must. The easier we can make things like two-factor authentication available and accessible to people, the better. And I think it's something to consider is that people don't really change defaults very often. Most people just leave defaults as they are. And so kind of considering what those defaults look like from the onset, and not just automatically subscribing them to your newsletter or whatever. Your marketing team might hate this idea, but have those unchecked by default. Because what you want is people to opt in and want to engage with you further. It's a thoughtful pattern that I think we can start doing right away. The other thing is just to make people aware of everything that's going on in the application or service. If desktop notifications are disabled, let them know that if they try to do something that requires it. Don't just make desktop notifications a default. And it's been really, really great to see, OEMs of devices and operating systems really kind of baking in these features that consider people's well-being from the onset, right? It's all about this thoughtful transparency of data, how you're spending time on the application. Google does a really great job with this with their digital well-being initiative. Apple has a similar feature they launched recently with their screen time. It's really about a thoughtful kind of glance at here's how you're spending your time on the apps and services in your digital life, and making it very clear and transparent about how that time's being spent. All right, the next one I want to talk about is empowering. Empowering really indicates that we can ensure products center on the value they create, and provide to people over the revenue it can generate. This is all about, prioritizing human value over business value. And there's a few ways we can do this. You probably see a pattern here. But keeping people in control of their notifications, of their settings, who can see your post, how they see it, how you can be tagged in photos. I think this granular control is actually very valuable. And again, some of the worst offenders in this space are really making great strides, I think, in the right direction. Facebook being one of them. They really let you kind of modify not only how this content you post gets put on your timeline and who it's shared with, but also how you can get tagged in photos if you want to be anonymous, and even gives you the control, the empowerment to review when someone's tagging you, when someone's pulling you into the digital realm a little bit. The other thing we can do is just disable read receipts. I think, one thing that's kind of an urge that we have as humans is to engage when we know someone's engaging with us. If they comment on a photo, or they tag you in a photo, or you get a notification, there's an urge to, reply immediately sometimes, right? And I think that if we can just kind of allow to remove this social reciprocity that's there, we can allow for people to kind of have healthier digital lives a little bit more. They can engage when they're ready and when they want to. And most importantly, I think we can empower people by allowing technology to only be visible when it's needed and invisible otherwise, right? This is actually one of the fantastic things about voice assistants. They are out of the way when we don't need them, and when we do need them, we invoke them through voice, right? There's not a lot of friction there, which could be problematic sometimes. And it could also always be listening to you, which I think we're hearing a lot about these days. So there's kinks to be worked out, but I think voice represents that kind of UI list interface that it could be very valuable for people. All right, the last principle I want to talk about today is inclusive. Inclusive really dictates that we should put people's needs first and foremost to expand the reach of the product to the largest range of people possible. One way we can do this is to just extend the solve, extend the value. Oftentimes it's features that were meant for an audience with a disability that actually find their way to being valuable for everyone. So shout out to all the parents in the room. I love closed captions. I know that they've been around for a while, but closed captions are a godsend because really they allow me to engage with video content without waking the kids, right? And that's actually kind of valuable. And closed captions weren't intended for me, but yet I get a lot of value out of them, and I know a lot of other people do as well. The other is just giving people control over accessibility settings, allowing for them to quickly get access to these. And traditionally, browsers have had really powerful accessibility controls. They've done a really great job, but it's been great to actually see this level of control make its way into smartphones, right? Apple does a fantastic job at kind of just allowing for you to quickly access accessibility features and modify them how you need to. In closing, I'd like to point out that I think we need less disruption. We need more cultivation, right? We need to cultivate this culture of slowing down and being more intentional, both within our organizations and for the people that are using our products and services. Now, I mentioned that my slides will be available if you want to check them out. They're the bit.ly link you see on the screen. But also, each one of the principles I kind of talked about today, you can download as an 11 by 17 poster at Humane by Design. I encourage everyone to do that. Put them up on your walls. Have these conversations. I'd love to hear how those go. And finally, if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Yablonski. Thank you, everyone.